What does it mean to be fully present? Are we ever truly in the moment? How does one prevent themselves from thinking about the past or the future? What are those inner thoughts or shadows that follow us in life? What does it mean to be the embodied masculine? I don't know, but Ben does. Ben Vaeth-Levin is a local leader for the Mankind Project. He helps men discover themselves on a deeper level. Let's go. I remember meeting you. I don't know if I remember meeting you for the first time.
Yeah, I think there was some because I knew your dad pretty well. I worked with him a bunch back with, I think, Chris Gorman, who got me into the business. He's my uncle.
Wait, Chris Gorman's your uncle?
Yeah.
I had no idea all this time.
Yeah, he's married to my mom's sister. So not blood related, but married into the family. That's been a super good relationship for me in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah. And he introduced me to lots of great people, including your dad. And he tends to give a bit of a preamble before you meet somebody. And so I'm sure he did that with your dad and was like, Len Schmitz, great guy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, Chris is great. I love working with Chris. He's got he's got a lot of energy. And a lot of things to say, but in a good way. I love working with him, and he's recommended me recently on a good amount of work. So
cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, man. He does that for people he likes, and not for people he doesn't.
We've recently talked about fatherhood too, which is cool.
Yeah.
Because he's a father of 3 boys.
Yep.
And
yep. I spent a lot of time with those kids growing up.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Still do. They're my cousins.
That makes sense. Yep. Sure.
Anyway, so I met you, right? Is that okay if I?
Yeah.
And I probably had some ideas in my head. Okay, he's this other guy's kid, so whatever. Maybe he's, worth a damn. Maybe he's not.
Nepotism.
Well, yeah, I get that. Yeah. Nepotism.
Yeah. I felt very a little bit self-conscious about that.
Oh, same, dude. I'm not usually so straightforward about Chris Gorman's my uncle. But I'm comfortable with that now. I have a good grip on my own skill. So if people want to believe that I got unfair advantage, that's fine. And maybe I did, but that's the way the world is sometimes.
Yeah, I know I definitely got a huge leg up. Just connecting with everyone that my dad was connected with, starting out.
Well, that's the way it is. That's what everybody says, right? It's who you know.
Who you know, not what you know, right?
Well, to be honest, that was pretty frustrating to me at first when I got in the film business, because in my judgment, I could look around and see some guys who were super, just great at telling a story. And whether or not they were excellent at the job didn't seem to matter. And this was all my juvenile green judgment too. My opinions have changed so much since then, but I had this judgment that it's about 50% how good you are at what you do and 50% how likable you are and how well you can tell a story. And for some reason back then I was not valuing likability and telling a story. Of course those things are what make life great. So to belittle them was a mistake. And really it was because I didn't think I was very likable or good at telling a story back then. So I was I'm at a disadvantage then. I better be technically very proficient.
Yeah. I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a great storyteller. And so that's kind of what some of this is about.
Yeah.
Practicing storytelling.
Yeah. Well, you're in an interviewing role.
I am. So the easier part.
Well, you're kind of crafting the story from the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to ask me the right questions.
That's true. This could be a terrible conversation because I'm responsible to lead it. So.
Or it could be great because of that.
Yeah. Well, I am curious about. I know we've talked over the years, and just most recently a couple weeks ago about the men's work that you do. What exactly is that?
It is You know, there's still a part of me that's like, ooh, I gotta be really careful about how I answer, and because like people are suspicious of men, to generalize, and nowadays when I generalize, I do it consciously, with like the reservation that it's never correct to generalize. I've run into people being suspicious of men gathering, period. Like a lot of people have questions about, you know, they'd rather know like how come women aren't there than like what are you doing. So I appreciate that you're asking what are we doing, but still I have this thing in me that's like, be careful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you kind of have to be. I think that's smart. I think especially in today's world where everything is instant and all it takes is a soundbite or one little recording or just anything. If you're doing an event, I mean, what do you host events?
It's interesting. I'm like, yes, I'll get there in a second. I want to just straightforwardly answer your question, but I'm not even worried about sound bites. Like, there aren't sound bites that, I mean, anything can be twisted, but like, when I go to these things and do this work, there aren't sound bites that could be captured that people would be like, oh, it sucks. It's like any sound you would capture would be like, oh my God, what a wonderful thing that is happening.
Yeah.
That's my opinion about it.
Right. But yet you said you still feel some apprehension.
Yeah, because of the general feeling in the air that men, when they get to do what they choose to do, they'll do harm. And like I more or less grew up with that being the attitude around me. And it wasn't really on purpose conveyed, but that was sort of how I thought people were talking about men.
Mm-hmm. So when you say when men choose to do things they want to do, they're going to cause harm to others or to themselves or both? Or?
Well, others is what people care about. Like they do harm to themselves and to other men. I've experienced a lot of conversations where people, I don't want to say they don't care about it. They're not interested to hear about it. They're not interested to talk about that part of it. Like a lot of people are, you know, to not generalize. I meet plenty of people who I tell about this stuff and they're like, oh my God, my brother needs that. I wish my dad would do that. Stuff like that happens all the time as well. But it's the other situation where people are not, where they're more suspicious than curious. That just like hurts my heart and it makes it hard to talk about. And you know, letting people know that your heart is hurt is not a very popular thing to do.
Right.
So, and I don't want to get into like presenting myself as a victim here. It's just some things about life have been hard, even despite being, you know, in the category of a person who looks like this and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
That's the world we live in.
Well, let's talk about your life for a second. Okay. And then, you know, because I'm interested to hear how you got to where you are now. What was your childhood like? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in northern Baltimore City. And then we moved into the county when I was 8 because the elementary school I was going to closed. And my mom wanted to go to the schools in Baltimore County. So I've been around Baltimore my whole life, and I didn't really know what this city was until I became an adult. Went to college in College Park outside of DC, worked in that area for a little while, was a programmer. Now I move heavy things around out of trucks instead of doing that. But when I quit that programming job, I came back and I lived in Baltimore City in Mount Vernon, which is like an interesting, artsy, relatively affluent part of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly over time, I've gotten like to know and to appreciate the diversity and more nuance of the city. There's still like enormous areas of the city I know literally nothing about and have never visited. I mean,
So when you said you used to work in programming,
mm-hmm.
I remember that now from a while back. Yeah. When did you, like, how long were you doing that, and when did you decide that you wanted to, play around with lights and move heavy things in and out of trucks? Because that's quite the, the typical computer programmer life to more of a grunt life. For lack of a better word.
I mean, and that's kind of relevant to the men's work stuff that we could get into, because doing the programming work and intellectual kind of work, academic-ish work, there's a lot of prestige available in that, and being clever and being intellectually gifted gets you a lot of benefit if you want it in the way that our world's set up right now. Like, there's lots of other things to be good at that are super valuable, but those ones are like, people look at them like, whoa, look at that guy kind of thing. So in transitioning from programming to working at Sirius, which rents lighting equipment, like, that's literally taking things off of shelves and putting them in trucks. So it was this like confusing situation for my ego, which for all its life had been building itself up on being like clever and good at math problems and stuff like that. And now I'm like blue collar, and I'm like, nobody in my family. Well, actually, it's not true. I had an uncle who was a carpenter.
And another uncle that
works in this business, right? Yeah, I have a lot of uncles, which is great.
How many uncles?
4. Well, including the ones who married in, it's like 7. Yeah, 7.
Okay.
8, including one on my dad's side. He's a lot older.
Yeah.
My dad was 20 years older than my mom, which is part of my history.
Oh, okay.
So we can jump sideways to there if you want.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you have all these uncles that you, I'm assuming, have relationships with. Some more than others, maybe, but...
Yeah. No, so... Okay, so my family is really great. They have their flaws, like every family. I'm not going to, like, gossip about them on air here, but they're very connected. Like, I grew up having a Sunday dinner at my grandma's house every Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah. And
with how many?
So I'm the oldest of, I think there are 18 of us, 19 including my sister, my stepsister, sister Lily. I think there are 19 of us in my generation on my mom's side, cousins, and I'm the oldest one.
Wow. So
I always had kids around me.
Do you have siblings or just cousins?
I have one brother, 3 years younger.
Okay.
He lives in Australia now.
Australia?
Yeah. Yeah.
How often do you talk to him?
We talk once a week now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I need to talk to my sister once a week.
It took a while to get there.
Yeah.
To be honest, like, there's so much I could go into. It's like everything's relevant.
Mm-hmm. But let's go back. So every Sunday you had dinner at your grandma's house.
Yep.
All 19 kids, correct? For the most part,
when we were young, it was almost always everybody.
So I was gonna say the 19 kids and then all their parents.
Right.
You're talking about 50 people.
So once there were 19 of us, I was already in college, so I wasn't going every time.
Okay. Too cool for that.
No, dude, I came back. I drove. Probably every other week I came back, and I even came back after I started my job and went to Northern California. By that time, some of my other younger cousins weren't coming all the time. I've been one of the most devoted, I would say, and that's not to like belittle anybody else's decisions, but it's just always been really important to me. And maybe big piece of my life puzzle. My father died when I was 6 years old. He had Crohn's disease, and that apparently can mess your liver up. So he went in to get a liver transplant, and his body rejected it. That's how he actually died. That happened when I was 6. So I didn't understand any of that when I was 6. And that's been incredibly hard for me throughout my life.
Yeah, I can imagine. I grew up with a father who was around. I mean, my father kind of gave me my career, my way of life, right? Mm-hmm. So how lucky am I? I mean,
well, and you seem like you have a really good father and a good relationship. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
From time to time.
Yeah.
Like not everybody has a good father. You know, some people's fathers fuck them up. Like I've met people who are like, you might be lucky that your father died because like their fathers were so bad for them. So like I'm not sitting here saying like my situation is worse than somebody else's. It is what it is, and it was hard.
Yeah. So you're 6 years old. Man, that's first grade. Your father passes away. You don't understand it. When did you first kind of start to understand it on a different level, or really kind of grasp that like you would never have a father?
Wow, great question. That's a big part of my shadow. So I'll get into that as we talk about men's work. I think I was about 14, 15. I might have been as old as 17. It occurred to me, this idea suddenly occurred to me that I am deficient in some way. And I wasn't saying that in a judgmental way. I wasn't ashamed about it. It was just like, this has to be true. Because I don't have a father, so I don't have whatever people get from having a father. So let me use my reflective powers. I've always been very internally aware and focused, and used to call myself an introvert. Let me use these powers of logic and reflection that I possess to like figure this out. And like importantly, I was always doing this alone, which is different from men's work. Back then I was doing it alone, and I couldn't figure it out, you know, like from the inside. I don't know. It's like trying to notice how much your beard grew in one day or something. Like right. From the inside, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And then I just let go of that investigation, but the idea persisted that there is something wrong with me. That I'm not okay, that like life, and later in life it sort of crystallized into, without words necessarily, like you're not resilient. Like there are things there are situations that life will present to you that you won't be able to handle. Like that was my story about myself, and it was connected for me to my father's death.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you started, so I feel like maybe you already answered this, but remind me, when you transferred over to being a blue collar, quote unquote, worker, was your uncle involved?
Yes,
in this?
Directly.
Right, directly. So were you just at a family gathering or something, and you were like, man, I just this programming stuff, I feel like I need to just be out in the world or whatever. I don't know. What were you thinking when you transitioned, and how did that work?
I used to be embarrassed about this time in my life to some degree, but I was not miserable at my job, but I wasn't happy. There weren't a lot of people my age. I didn't like the place of Northern Virginia, of like the office park, sort of cut a 6-lane road through the trees way that Sterling, Virginia was, the part that I was in. I'm sure there are incredibly lovely rural parts of Sterling, but like that part of it didn't appeal to me, the office parky aspect. And I worked at a satellite company, which was pretty cool. They made satellites and launched them into space. and I worked on the software that controlled those satellites, like sent commands to them and received data. And when there was something to do, I was good at it. But there often wasn't very much to do. And I won't go into it. It's nothing, no shade against anybody or any way that company was run. It was just kind of the nature of it. I don't really want to go into the complexity of how it was structured and all blah, blah, blah. But
Sure.
in short, it was not fulfilling or socially gratifying, although I did make friends eventually after like 2 years. And I started rock climbing down there, which has been a really important hobby in my life. And I decided to quit so I could go travel. And I was afraid that people were going to be like, I guess like implying or telling me directly that I'm making a terrible decision. And it was really the opposite. People were like, oh my God, it's so cool what you're doing. Like, I wish I could do that kind of thing. And then I found myself without a job. I was babysitting to make money. I was watching my uncle's kids. And I was like 24. So I was
Chris's kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris's kids.
Yeah.
And
You were 24. So when did you start? I guess programming in the job that we're talking about.
just after college.
Okay.
Like 20. And I like kids. I've always, I was always around them, all my cousins and stuff. And I like teaching them. I like being with them. I like making space for people, not just kids. But kids have always been a place where I feel free to be myself. Because they don't make up stories about why I'm doing what I'm doing like everybody else does.
You don't feel like you're being judged by kids, maybe?
Yeah, or like you are, but it's like so pure. It's like
Right.
it's not from a moral place. Their judgments don't come with, and you're a bad person or a good person. They're just like, whatever, you look weird. It's the worst thing a kid could say to me.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I feel the exact opposite. Like, it's totally different with my daughter, but until we had her, like before having her, I just had no affinity for kids, really. I felt like I didn't know how to talk to them because I'm like, I don't know your I don't know how much you understand, or like I found it a little difficult to have a conversation with kids because I just never knew where they were. Oops. Speaking of that, That's good timing.
You never knew where they were?
Yeah, that was a bad way to describe it. I never knew where they were in terms of like development, or like, what do you talk to an 8-year-old about? I don't know. Like, it never felt natural. Or you're saying you always enjoyed that.
Overall, like there are certain age.
Pause 1 sec.
Okay.
Kids, yeah. So you spend a lot of time around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
your
there are
cousins, right?
You were saying that sometimes you don't know what's going on. You don't know what to say to an 8-year-old, right?
Yeah,
For
example, I think it might have just been, a lack of experience. Just spending time around children. I don't know.
Oh yeah, sure, right. And I
like as an adult, I just never really did that.
Yes.
I gotta catch my breath.
Okay.
I'm out of shape. So,
well, I'll just
I always knew, just when it comes to having a kid of my own, it's completely different. It's hard to describe. Where now I can talk to kids much more confidently because I've had experience talking to a little child of my own.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like, maybe I was just overthinking it.
Uh-huh.
Right.
That's interesting and great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been different ages of kids where I do get that basically social anxiety about the prospect of talking with them, like, because I feel like I'm supposed to entertain them or know what to say or something like that.
I think that's exactly what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
That's it. Just.
Yeah, but then it's like they don't care. Like, they don't have the same kind of thing where they're like, oh, what a loser. I mean, until they get old enough, until they get like middle school age, then they might do that depending on who they are.
Yeah.
But nowadays I'm pretty comfortable being me, and that's actually quite a recent development. So you've caught me at a good time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Like my awareness of how I could be perceived negatively or positively would interfere so much with me just saying what's on my heart or in my gut, or however, different people think about that kind of thing. Where do our words come from? Why am I choosing to sit this way? Am I choosing, I'm just like, all that stuff is in my head so much that it prevents me from actually being me, right? Like right now, for example, I'm aware that there's a camera pointed at me. I have no idea who may or may not hear this. I'm aware that I'm talking in a microphone, like maybe I'm doing it well, maybe I'm not. All these things that I'm like also aware of occasionally, that interfere, and I imagine this is a somewhat universal experience, that interfere with me just like speaking what's meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of reasons to hide what's meaningful to me all my life, and no longer. I'm still working on it, but
Yeah.
for the most part, I feel like it's actually safe to talk about what I want to and what matters to me.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
We're always changing and evolving and internalizing who we are and what we do with our free time or what we do for a living but I think that what you just said is a very common thing for humanity. Like, just.
Yeah. And we're sitting here in this gray room, right? Like, if there was a beautiful woman right there looking not at us, reading a book or something, like, the way I'm behaving would probably change. Because maybe she's listening. Like,
Yeah.
And that's like a shadow that I'm working through currently. Like, I've worked through a lot of my shadows around men and trust of humans generally. I'm still working on my shadows with women. And like one important way to me that it manifests is like, can I actually just be myself around women? Which has been hard for me because I'm afraid of judgment. I'm afraid of I'm going to do something that is going to harm them unintentionally. And like that goes sort of in with my training is the word that comes up. I wasn't trained to believe that men are inherently bad, but that is sort of what I perceive to be in the air. So I didn't want to be one. I was also proud of it all along because I just am one. It was very challenging to step into ownership of being a man in my life, and I've only done it very recently. I'm 41 now.
Mm-hmm.
And the men's work has been instrumental in that. It's not the only reason that it's happened, but it's been very important.
So how long ago did you decide to get involved with, well, first, what's like the broad elevator pitch of what you're doing with this men's work? Like,
Okay.
are you meeting with people? Are you
So there's two important elements in the elevator pitch. One is initiation. And I mean that in the ancient sense. I don't mean it in the sense of deprivation, cruelty, like whatever comes to mind in the modern mind when I say initiation. It's usually not pleasant stuff, which makes sense to me because you think of fraternities or whatever. But that is something that there's an international organization called the Mankind Project where I do most of my men's work. And they have initiated about 80,000 men over the last 40 years. And the process of doing so has changed slightly in response to feedback, criticism.
So pause one sec. What do
Yeah.
you mean? So when you say initiated, what exactly you're talking about? You mean like starting them on a process of becoming confident, or I mean, what do we mean by that?
I mean, giving them, so helping them to touch a piece of their shadow is one of the main, that's how the Mankind Project uses language about it. And shadow is a concept I think that Carl Jung came up with. He was a psychologist about 100 years ago, I think. And the shadow is what we hide, repress, and deny. It's what we'd rather not believe is within us. So touching that, acknowledging that it's there consciously, most people, men included, have a huge amount of resistance to doing that, to acknowledging and let alone honoring what their shadow might be, and deciding to work with it in a conscious way.
So just to understand this, the shadow more, I really like that word. And what would your biggest shadow be then?
It's quite a question.
Yeah. I mean, like just for example, like what are you working through personally, as an example of what some other men are maybe going through?
Well, I'll say that a very common shadow is I am not enough. I don't deserve to be loved. I'm going to fuck it up. Those are like extremely common shadows for men, and I assume people. So something that Mankind Project, MKP, I'll use that from now on if that's okay, MKP helps to give men is a mission that they create from within themselves. And my mission is I create a world where every being feels at home by healing shame in myself and others. And then there's a shadow mission, and I was working on that today, maybe as I drove here, so my shadow's mission would be something like I create a world of fascinating chaos by manipulating silently and joyously. So like that's a shadow, right? And I'm honoring my shadow by putting it that way. A lot of men, they say their shadow mission, and it's like, oh my god, yeah, that's clearly evil and awful.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like, chaos is fucking fascinating. So I can see why I like to try for myself to see what do I get out of these behaviors that I don't actually want to be doing? Because I've lived a lot of life in a state of loneliness. And so having chaos that I get to be like, ooh, I understand what's happening. That's a nice escape mechanism. Now the impact of it on other people is bad, right? But my shadow isn't necessarily concerned with that. And that's the way it is for shadow a lot of the time. Like, and we talk a lot about impact in men's work. Like, what is your intended and unintended impact? And here's a good broad stroke of what men's work is about. acting in a way so that my intentions and my impact are in alignment, and knowing in the first place what are my intentions.
Mm-hmm.
The Mankind Project in particular has a mission for itself that's about making a world of safety where all men are brothers, where genocide and war are nothing more than entries in a history book. I don't have it committed to memory, but those are some words that are in it. And they have values: integrity, accountability, compassion, leadership, a couple others that I'm not remembering. So that's probably a decent summary of what it's about. The initiation itself is to touch the shadow, to discover contact also with a purpose in life. That's importantly comes from within me. It's not like this men's work. It's maybe other organizations do it differently, but for us, it's nobody's telling you this is the type of mission you should have. Like, it comes from within. And it's usually connected to, like, what did you lack in childhood the most deeply is kind of the approach, the psychological approach that's used by MKP. And from that, let's figure out how we make the world that we want to see.
Wow. That's some pretty powerful stuff there, Ben.
It is. It is.
Well, I think in today's world, you mentioned you're worried about maybe saying, what did you say earlier? Something about saying the wrong thing, or worried about...
I'm just worried about the response of suspicion and lack of curiosity. Suspicion about, oh, you're men gathering together and you're not telling us exactly what you're doing. I'm very suspicious about that. I'm assuming that what you're doing is bad. I'm assuming, like, a lot of people seem to assume that what we're doing is sort of deciding what everyone's fate should be in some sense. And they're like, women should be there because they have to have input and that kind of thing. I'm like, that makes sense, but it isn't what we're doing. But it can be hard to convey what we're doing for a couple reasons. One, because the initiation process, we want it to be surprising and challenging. So, like, if we tell everyone exactly what happens there, and it's on the internet, like, if you do want to find out, like, people have written it down, so it's not actually hidden. But I'm not going to sit here and, like, go through all the details, because I want, if men come and do it, I want them to have an experience of discovery. And knowing everything in advance prevents discovery, which is this. It's like when you ride a bike, nobody tells you how to do it. You discover what balance feels like. So there's a process of discovery that happens inside of the initiation weekend.
Right. And so what would you say to somebody that says, well, hey, I'm a woman and I feel similar things, like I want to be a part of this?
Well,
and I know this is a tough question to answer.
No, yeah,
right?
I appreciate it.
I understand.
Because it's a safe place to answer the question.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think it's in this world today, and yeah, it seems like a very sensitive thing.
It is.
Which I think
it is for a lot of people.
Which is, yeah, and I totally respect. Yeah, and I totally respect that. But what is it about having, like, an all men experience? You know, it's almost like maybe, you know, there's those all boys schools. I never went to one, but I heard it's a different experience and mostly positive. But what are your thoughts on that?
So this is the kind of question where it's like, okay, I need to imagine all of the criticisms of what I'm about to say before I say it so that I can dance around them. But I'm just not going to do that. So one thing, I'll just speak about myself. I can't justify like the choices that the Mankind Project has made over the course of 40 years, and it's a huge conversation. So something that matters to me about No Women is that I don't personally feel safe talking about certain things when women are present. Whether that's justified or good or not, let the fates decide. But I don't feel safe talking about certain things around women. And that changes over time. Like there's a lot more that I feel safe talking about with women than I used to. And that's like, it's about me, right? I think there's plenty of reason in this time and place in human history for me to feel unsafe around women. And in most conversations, that's not really a welcome thing to say. Like the way people react is as if they don't give a shit. And that's okay. Because, women don't feel safe around men. It's like, I know that. I know. I'm not trying to say belittle that or say it's not true. It just happens to be true that I also don't feel safe around women. Yeah, and I think there are good reasons for that.
When you say safe, you mean
emotionally?
Yeah, emotionally safe, comfortable.
Comfortable, but that's different from safety.
Yeah.
I don't feel entitled to comfort.
Yeah.
And I don't feel entitled to safety either, but if I'm going to get vulnerable, I need to feel somewhat safe.
Yeah. Because I think safety for women might feel a little, it might be similar, might be emotionally safe, like
totally.
you just said.
No doubt.
Right.
Yeah, and women, broadly speaking, have to deal with more physical unsafety than men do. Although, I don't really want to get political here. Like, there's a way in which men have to deal with physical unsafety that women don't. Like, immensely. It's just different. But other people have discussed that ad nauseum, so that's not really what I want to talk about today.
That's fine. We don't have to. we don't have to go down that road.
Yeah.
First of being, I mean, I love, as scrawny as I am, I love physical contact. I love sport.
Yeah.
I love hockey. I love hitting. It's just fun to go into a corner where there's a puck. It's like, hey, that's my puck. And you go into the corner and you ram each other.
Uh-huh.
And you try to come out victorious. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes you fall down. But sometimes they fall down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, things can get heated. And then, of course, the stereotypical hockey fight. And then that'll happen. But I'm not at that point in my life anymore where I'm getting that mad about it. It's more of a respect thing. Like,
mm-hmm.
All right, let's go for this puck. Let's push each other around. But, like, I'm not going to be a sore loser and get mad and want to fight you if I lose, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's one person getting upset at the other because they lost, essentially, right? Lost the physical battle.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm imagining is the ego gets involved and it says, I lost, therefore I'm a bad person. Therefore, I have to prove something else is true right now. And that's a shadow thing, or the shadow gets involved. It says losing equals I suck. And they can't live with that. So they do something about it. And that has an impact on other people that is often negative.
Yeah.
So, and that's the kind of thing in men's work that we actively strive to identify and bring in control. We talk about putting our shadows in front of us. So that we can choose how to behave even when that I suck voice is present, or like, watch out, is present, or I fucking hate everybody is present. Like, still, how can I be a person that I want to be and have my intentions and my impact in alignment with each other? Because those voices aren't going to cease emerging or disappear forever. Like, that's just not how human beings work. That's what I think. But as it arises, what do I do with it? Am I unconscious of it and it controls me? Or do I say, hello, shadow, I'm not interested in that input right now. Thank you. Something like that.
Yeah. That's cool. I think there's like the old tale of like a good and an evil on both shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your shadow is somehow maybe all of that, or is it more on the evil side of like, oh, I shouldn't be acting a certain way, but this shadow is talking to me type thing?
Yes, it is like that.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't believe in good and evil. I don't see that as a useful framework. I don't think it's working for humans to divide things into good and evil. Now, behaving as if I believe that is sometimes difficult because it's all around me. Everybody divides things into good and evil. Not everybody, but most people. And so it can be hard for that not to impregnate my actions and beliefs and thoughts. But personally, dividing things into good and evil doesn't work for me. Not into good and bad. Because we do that a lot subconsciously, in my view. Like words like tribe. On the face, they seem kind of neutral, necessary, natural. But for some people, the existence of tribes implies conflict in the future, like guarantees conflict in the future. And so they have this thing that's unspoken that they believe about what a tribe is, where something bad happens eventually. So the choice then to describe humans as being in tribes has consequences, whether they're intended or not. And now that's getting pretty deep.
Yeah.
I think conceptually.
Right. But I mean, that's something I've heard over, the last few years, being tribal, right? And it's very, especially it's easy to go right to the political route of people in their tribes of
Totally.
political beliefs, and it's like anything you believe.
Well, so beliefs, in my view, are stories. There's a story that tribes are a thing. And I think that story makes sense. It makes sense to me why people describe groups of humans as tribes sometimes. Not every group of aligned humans is a tribe. Like, the people who live in Maryland are not a tribe. Maybe some people think they are, but most people don't. Some people think Democrats are a tribe. Other people wouldn't describe them as a tribe. My point is, calling something a tribe is a story, not a belief or a truth. Maybe it's a belief. That's fine. My point is that it's also a story. And we can choose how to tell stories. So if I describe my political affiliations as tribal, then I'm setting myself up for a fight at some point, because that's what happens with tribes.
Right.
If I don't tell the story of who I am as being a member of a tribe, and I tell it some other way, then I may not have a tribal fight in my future. But if I do tell it that way, then I probably will. So this is not men's work exactly, but it's adjacent in like being intentional and discovering like, how do I want to be in the world consciously?
Let's take a step back to something that caught my attention was, again, the feeling safe around women. And, we don't have to go into detail, but I would imagine you've had some number of relationships with women. Serious relationships.
Yeah.
And how has that shaped kind of this feeling of not being safe?
Well, whatever I say is going to be a story. So it's not going to be true. It's going to be my best attempt. So my mom and her sister, my Aunt Mary, they were kind of like co-moms to me. They both were single moms. Mary had a daughter, my cousin Gertie, who's 3 weeks difference in age from my brother. So they're about 3 years younger than me. So it was the three of us and the two moms. And they were very much feminists of whatever that meant to them at the time. Like, feminist means so many different things throughout time and even to different people today. They were not man-hating type of feminists. They didn't sit around bashing men. One impactful memory for me, or occurrence, was that in the radio, in the car, listening to the radio, like news radio. This was during the time that Bob Dole and Bill Clinton were running against each other for president. And the radio would report blah, blah, blah about Bob Dole. And my mom would say stuff like, fucking men. And I was about 9. And I was pretty cogent in like understanding of levels of abstraction. So I like kind of knew that what she was saying was BS because she was generalizing. But it was also affecting me. It was like, there was something in me that I couldn't actually name. Like, what, this thing is happening in me where, and I told her, I was like, Mom, I'm afraid that when me and Dan grow up, you're not going to like us. And this was very impactful to her. Now I know that even at age 9, that was a bit of manipulation on my part, which sucks for me actually, as well as her. Because I had already absorbed her opinion that men suck.
Right.
And I wasn't actually trying to address that. I just wanted her to stop saying it. So I guilted her.
So you said just going back for a second, you mentioned your mom and your aunt were feminists, but they weren't men hating, but kind of sounds like there's a little bit of it. A little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I would say that my mom had a little bit of rage that she let fall on men, and I don't know what her rage is about. Her husband died. She was very angry about that, but yeah. I don't think she blamed men in this sort of feminist way for it. I don't know. I don't want to psychoanalyze her. I just want to say what happened.
Sure.
And my Aunt Mary, I remember that she wore this T-shirt that had this picture of a fish on a bicycle, and it said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." And I didn't know what the hell to make of that at age 8, 9, whatever. But I think over time, some kind of unverbal awareness crept into me. Like, women don't want men to be around. Of course, the way that my mom and aunt lived, that wasn't true, like based on their actions, but it was their public pronouncements. So that started it off for me, I think. And then in middle school, it could have been high school, this memory is unclear, there were 2 instances of like a sexual harassment teaching. Like, what is it? How does it work? What's illegal? What's not? And I remember that a story was told about there was a man who was taken to court, not because of something he said, but because of the way he looked at a woman. And the case was thrown out, or he didn't get convicted, but that happened. And that just like sunk into me. Like, it's possible to look at a woman in a way that she'll feel so something that she'll want to put you in jail. And so there's 2 things. Like, she'll feel a certain way. I don't want to do that to somebody, even accidentally. Plus, it could like materially impact me, no matter what my intentions were. So that didn't set me up well for like being myself around women, because I have desire for women. I do look at women. I like looking at them. Like, I'm going to go out there and say it.
Yeah.
I'm a man and I like looking at women. That I wouldn't even have fucking said for most of my life. I would have been too afraid to say that.
Jeez. And so this was middle school when you remember that court case. Middle school is also an interesting time. By interesting, I mean it's really awkward. You have a sea of kids that are hitting puberty and having all these feelings that they'd never had before.
Sure.
Right?
Right. And they have their own dumb stories about why anything's happening and, you know, who's in a relationship with who and what happened behind closed doors. And like that whole thing, it's so confusing at best. And it provokes so much shame in the listener at worst. Because, like, what are these people doing who are generally well regarded? Well, I'm not doing that, so I must suck. That kind of thing goes on. And then people are actively abusive to one another. Nobody did that to me, but I saw it happen so often, and I was, like, terrified of becoming one of the abused, one of the, like, just, you're a punching bag now. That's your reputation. And a lot of my life has been lived in response to that fear of becoming one of these punching bags.
Yeah. Man. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough I mean, it sounds like you're working through it. You know, I hope you're making progress.
Absolutely. Lots of progress. I'm not afraid of that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I never internalized as much as you.
Yeah.
I like to think I'm a deep thinker, but I think you're on another level. Like, really. And maybe that's for whatever reason. I just remember middle school being like, I wasn't paying attention to the news. Or I wasn't paying. Yeah. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah.
This is back in like 99 or something when you were.
Right. Well, so I didn't know it was Bob Dole. And no, it was 92. 91, 92.
When you were in middle school?
I would have been at the end of elementary school then. It would have been like 94.
Okay, regardless.
So my mom yelling at the radio, that was about 1991.
Gotcha.
Me being taught about sexual harassment was like 1995.
And then what happened in high school? Did you just cruise through, kind of were you timid around?
Super timid. I was definitely not talking to women I was attracted to. I would talk to girls who who I enjoyed to have an intellectual conversation with. That was my comfort level. There were girls that I was attracted to and like really liked looking at them, but I would never let them know, you know, hopefully that I was looking at them.
Yeah.
So how am I ever going to like end up with somebody who I like? I'm not. And I was very lucky in some ways. Like, I'm attractive enough. I was athletic, intelligent. So like there are reasons that people liked me anyway, even though I was very withdrawn. And I ended up dating 3 different girls in high school. And they all were the advancers. That's been the story of my life. Like women let me know, obviously, that they would like to be in a relationship with me. I don't make moves. That's been my past. I don't intend for that to be my future.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, it's not like I just say yes to everybody, but there aren't that many people to say yes to. Like, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. So are you, you know, fast forwarding all the way to now, like what's going on there? Are you, you know, you're doing all this men's work, hopefully working through some of this stuff. Have you tried, I mean, dating to me sounds, you know, kind of terrifying. If I had to do it, you know, I've got my wife and kid that I'm happy with, but it takes work. It takes work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more work. You know, especially after having a kid, it changes everything. Because all of a sudden you're looking at each other, and then you both just stop looking at each other, and you're looking at this kid, and you're just like, I don't want to mess this up. Yeah. You know, and she means so much, like so much that I've never had feelings like this before. So it's like this new, your world just changes, but you still have to focus on each other.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I hear that kind of story a lot.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me. I hope for myself that I don't stop looking at my partner to a huge degree, but I understand, like, yeah, you got to focus on this being that needs and needs and needs. And I have no idea how I'll react to, like, what if I lost my child, like, and what kind of fear and determination that will bring out of me. You know, part of me imagines that since I've experienced very painful loss already, I may have more equanimity when it comes to, like, the idea that my child could die, because people's children die all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's just true. And they get through it. Not that I'm minimizing the impact of it, but, like, terrible things happen more or less constantly, and life goes on. And so I don't know how I would react individually to, like, oh my gosh, I have this brand new, like, being to protect and care about. Like, what is that going to do to how I operate in the world? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Nobody is. Especially for your first, if you only have one, or, you know, it's like you grow with your first child and you, like, parent your other ones, because it's like every experience you have with your firstborn is the first time you're doing it all together for the first time. The first 4-year-old birthday party, the first high school crush, the first middle school dance. It's all firsts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually what's really been fun, right? You can be terrified of it, but you can also just go with it and have fun and try to point them in the right direction and say, hey,
yeah,
you go down what path you want to go down, but that one over there you might want to go down that path because it might be good for you.
Yes. What else can you do? With anybody, your kid or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to help them, it's going to be their choice ultimately.
Yeah. You ever do any coaching with younger kids, or is a lot of the men's work kind of, it's all adult men, I would imagine, right?
Well, so the initiation, the idea is you become an adult man, no matter how old you are. So yes, it's all adult men. It's not kids in the way that you mean.
Yeah.
I like helping kids. I like anybody to help. I like helping anybody, including kids, to articulate who they are, who they want to be, and then be that. And I guess that's part of why I'm drawn to men's work, because that's very much what we do. But I think it's good for anybody. And I'm a big words guy, so articulation of things, it matters to me. And I've observed since I was young that the way people use language is very impactful. It was on me. And it may be less so on others, but for me it's a lot. And so, you know, that whole thing about what I was saying about tribe, like that's very abstract. At the same time, I think it's very important. And it's not the kind of thing a lot of people think about or even have time to think about. So anyway, like, deciding who am I, and that arises from, like, my experience, right? Like, what do I like is a big, in my opinion, motivator of, like, who am I? Like, what do I just enjoy doing? And then couple that with, what are my impacts on my community? And how do I balance that? What do I want? How do I impact? Okay, then how do I behave? So I love helping children with that. I love helping grown men with that. I currently am afraid to say that I have any ability to help grown women with that. I do hope for that to change if there are women who would want to be helped. But that's like an obvious growth point for me, because I don't intend to. My mission, create a world where all beings feel at home. That's not just men. Like, I'm talking about bugs. Like, bugs are easy. I think they feel at home in their bodies, no problem. But it is all beings on purpose instead of all humans. But it does include women.
Yeah.
Among everyone else. So
yeah,
I would like to become a person who knows how to help a woman articulate who she is and then be that. And part of me thinks that, and I'll consciously switch from talking about men and women to masculine and feminine.
Okay.
Hold
on 1 second. This
Yeah.
bird is.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that's a male bird or a female bird? It's a male, right?
Probably. He's trying to get a lot of attention.
From females.
Well, just attention.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I thought that's what the bird's called.
Yeah, probably from females. But
yeah.
Also, hey, I'm here. Don't come over here. To the other males. Perhaps. I don't know what kind of bird that is. Or if birds do that, but
it is kind of fascinating when you talk about males and females in the world, in the animal kingdom, and how they're
all
kind of the same. They're just trying to eat, trying to procreate, and that's it. I mean, is that all we do? Is that really?
We tell stories. We do that so much. Like, we love it and we hate it. So I think that's a big part of what being a human is telling stories. And people want to believe that sometimes they're not telling stories, they're telling the truth. They're expressing what is objectively true, especially if they're scientists. And that's fine with me. My opinion is that ultimately it is also all a story. Everything that comes out of anyone's mouth is a story. And that's what humans do, in addition to eating and procreating.
Yeah. And sleeping. I'm glad I don't have sleeping problems, because that sounds pretty awful. And then I want to imagine, is that a common thing with people that are trying to, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but like discover their shadow or confront their shadow? I would imagine sleep is like when you're not sleeping, how do you heal yourself if you can't sleep? You know, I think that
seems pretty important.
Yeah. And then what is sleep, right?
I read a theory recently that part of what happens is that, so your left brain and your right brain are only connected like right here. Like, they don't actually connect everywhere. They connect here. And that one of the things that happens during sleep is a lot of stuff passes back and forth through that channel. And so it's integrating. That's another big word in men's work, integration. And being in integrity means having your thoughts, words, and actions in alignment. That's one way to say it. That's a story.
You're getting pretty good at storytelling.
Thanks.
So I guess that means there's progress there, right?
Yeah, I like it now.
Yeah. But go ahead.
So that one thing that happens while you sleep is integration. Like, all these different things that have been happening inside of you all day they have a chance to talk to each other and combine with each other and make new patterns in your brain, or whatever happens in your brain. I like that idea quite a bit. And also I like the idea that dreams are the different parts of me having a conversation.
Yeah. So what's no, you just got me with that dream stuff. Now I'm like daydreaming.
Right, that's the thing too, right?
Yeah.
All these voices inside of you talking. Well, I could take that back to men's work if you want.
Sure.
The voices inside of us.
Yeah.
So another thing that Carl Jung, the psychologist, was really big on is archetypes. And in MKP, we use the masculine archetypes of king or sovereign, warrior, lover, and magician. So these are energies within us. Now, this is a story, right? This isn't true, but this is a useful story to me. The lover being the part of me that connects with sensuality, with being alive in the world, with hearing sounds and seeing sights and loving that, and also the sexual, like that's just part of sensuality, right? The warrior is the part of me that can turn down my emotions on purpose to do something, like just accomplish. It's the part of me that builds skill. It's the part of me that has discipline. And, to any women listening, obviously you have this ability too. We all of us humans have this stuff, but I'm just talking at this moment about the way that we use the masculine archetypes. We call them the masculine archetypes, but some people use them for women.
Well,
feminine too.
Women can be masculine, right? And
women can, and yeah, so
right,
that's what I was doing when the birds started chirping, was drawing a distinction between men and women and masculine and feminine. The sovereign or king is the part of me that has discernment, like chooses deliberately, has a vision that I choose for how I want the world around me to be, how I want to serve my community. It has a generous component. And then the magician or sage is the part of me that tells the stories, that makes them up, that initiates others into new ideas, new ways of seeing things, shares perspectives. It's transformative. It's the part that like really engages with the shadow and like helps it to see why it's beautiful or see how it can be, and things like that. It's also, the sage is the voice of experience that maybe advises the king. So like there's all these archetypes, and then the story goes on. There are mature versions, the adult versions of those archetypes, and there's immature versions. And then each of those, so that's 8, and each of those has an active shadow and a passive shadow. So like the warrior's active shadow is the sadist. It's the guy who turns his emotions down and has skill, but uses that to hurt people or himself. And hurting himself would be the masochist, or allowing himself to be hurt. So that's the passive shadow of the warrior, is the masochist. The active shadow of the lover is the addicted lover. The passive shadow is the impotent lover. And so now for each of these 8, 4 mature archetypes, 4 immature, they each have 2 shadows. So now I have all these options for how I want to name the voices inside of my head that are like, fuck women, they fucked me over all my life. Like, who's that talking? Is that the active shadow magician? Is it the sadist? Whatever, it doesn't matter what I name them, but I can name them, and that helps me to treat them with respect and get somewhere. So that is a big component of the ongoing men's work. So there's the initiation, and then there's the ongoing stuff of meeting in circles, building a container. That's jargon for like you and I have built a container right now in this podcast studio. It's like we came here with intention, we set it up, we're going to get comfortable, build trust, then we're going to talk about something that's hopefully transformative, and then we're doing it for some kind of reason ultimately, and then we're going to close that container and go home. Mm-hmm. So in men's work, we build a container too, and instead of holding space for a podcast, it holds space for support and transformation and character building, say.
Dude, that is, wow. That's pretty cool to be able to kind of break up your emotions into certain areas and label them and be like, okay, I feel like when you're feeling something negative, you can compartmentalize it into.
You can.
I'm forgetting the names now. The
it.
Magician, the warrior, the
king,
sage, king,
lover.
Yeah.
King, warrior, magician, lover. Those are the more traditional ones. or modern day traditional. It's like,
Sure, yeah.
You can speak with them. You can look at yourself from a removed place in a useful way. Like, whether or not I name them with these names, I have a swirl of emotion and judgment inside of me at any time. By giving that swirl particular names, I can engage with it. Other people might not feel it necessary to give it names and engage that way. They might do breath work. They might just do things they might do psychedelics, which you don't have to name everything. You just have an experience, and sometimes your body shakes and you release old trauma and without naming anything. For a lot of people in our culture, I think that doesn't entirely work because we're so concerned with like understanding everything and the story that we have being the correct story, and we want to like get it right. That's no longer my approach. Like, I think whenever I give something a name, the reason for doing that is to speak with it and allow it to change. But for a lot of people, my past self included, my current self included sometimes, like, I want to have the story of what is. And I want you to know that story and for you to buy into that language. I don't think that works. It's not how humans are. They do get that way. Like, religion is that often. It's like, here are the words. Bend your knees like this. Do this 3 times. Say these words. Good job, you're a believer. And people may or may not absorb the deeper lessons. So I'm just not like a person anymore who's concerned that if I tell you my truth, that you say it back to me with the same words. That I don't care. Like, it feels nice when you do that, but if you don't, I'm not offended.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how often are you working with this men's work? How often is it an everyday thing? I mean, maybe internally, but in terms of group activities, like how often is this going on in your life?
So the ongoing work is often, in MKP, we call those integration groups or I groups. And that's like a weekly, essentially support group meeting, the container like I described, where there's support and transformation. That's the purpose, and togetherness as well. Once a week is typical for those. And a lot of men don't actually go once a week, but it's available once a week.
And is this like a thing you do on Zoom or in person, or like
in person?
And so it's in person. It's obviously somewhere in Baltimore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we meet.
And is it like a nationwide? MKP is a nationwide?
It's international, actually.
International. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then you're just are you leading these groups, or like how involved are you?
So my group, whoever is feeling king energy on the night after we've all arrived.
King energy. That's a good one, man.
That's who leads it.
That's a new one. Okay.
And that could even flow. Like, so we divide it into rounds based on the archetypes. The lover round is first, where you check in and you bring up what's present in you. Some men, and it's up to the king how to do that. There will be a prompt. Like, I like to be like, say as many one-word feelings as you want, and then tell us a little bit about that. That helps keep it contained. Others are like, tell us how you are physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and just like take as much time as you want. So it varies a lot, and the character of the meeting changes based on the prompts and who's king and what kind of energy they're bringing.
Mm-hmm.
But so sometimes I lead it, sometimes another man leads it.
So, and I love the king energy thing. Just to understand it, I show up to this meeting. Obviously, I'm not going to have king energy because that's my first time. But is it one of those things where you feel like, yeah? Can you just explain that a little bit more? Like what that means? Like,
okay, yeah, I'll do my best. That's like something that's growing within me currently. Like, my king archetype is stronger than it was once. I would say that it means, so there's vision, discernment, compassion, generosity. I would say those are big virtues for king energy. So if I have a vision, like like the group is, again, for support and transformation, roughly. But within that, I might have a more specific vision. I want to like challenge the men or lead them to think about a certain area of life, something like this. That would be vision. I would say overall, if I'm in a place where I can hold space, where I can be where I can reserve some of myself to be watching everything from a somewhat removed level, then that would be king energy. But sometimes I'm not in that space. Sometimes like my girlfriend just broke up with me and my mind, everything reminds me of that. So like I'm not going to be a good king that night. But if I can hold the whole group and make decisions when decisions need to be made, and they're usually easy decisions, like are we going to keep doing this? Are we going to do it for 5 more minutes, or are we done? Like,
so it sounds like leadership, essentially, when you're feeling like a leader in that moment, in that day, with that group, and then that you find yourself becoming more and more of a leader. But it's a
particular form of leadership, because the other archetypes can be leaders too. Like somebody who has very beautiful lover energy, or has it right now, and is very connected with the sensations they're feeling, with their joy in being an embodied human, however that manifests, like they'll be able to lead. They'll have the presence to help other men do that. So they'll be leading in that way also. But the king is more like, I am taking responsibility for several humans and like how the evening goes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're doing this once a week, and
typically
at least having it available,
mm-hmm.
In person.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are typically around? I'm just trying to paint a picture here in my head.
Yeah. Lately it's been 6 to 8. Sometimes it's as few as 4, sometimes as many as 12. So that's a pretty healthy group. And 6 to 8 is honestly a fantastic number. When it gets to be more, there's just checking in, just becoming present takes like an hour. And these meetings are typically 2.5 hours long. So if you want to, and then the next round is the warrior round. And that's when you declare whether or not you're in accountability with the agreements that you've made. And if you're not, then there's a process for that. And it's like, okay, what did you do instead of keeping your agreement? How does it impact you? How does it impact others? What's the shadow? Why do you think you're behaving that way? And then it can go. It could be done there, or sometimes it's like, how do you want to do a small act of, I forget, but you want to bring food to the next meeting to like make up for you didn't keep your commitment that you made to everybody. Something like that is available. It's not necessary. It could go into working with your shadow right there, which is very deep work. It could be, okay, so your shadow says you don't deserve, like you didn't show up on time because nobody gives a shit about you. That's your shadow belief. So what's actually true about you? And you go that route and be like, people, if you get people to really get there, then they feel it. They're like, I do matter. Something like that might come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is part of the warrior round that I love. So after we do accountability, we all take time to stand.
Pause 1 second. So could you give me an example when you're going, you said the warrior round. So is that something where you're like, hey, I'm really having trouble with a problem. I need to act this way to solve that problem. But I did not act that way. Do you have an example of like what one of your meetings?
When I say accountability, what I mean is a specific agreement that I made to myself, with myself, to the group. And some men will talk about with the world. Am I in integrity with the world? And that's a little harder to work on, because you need to have a specifically articulated thing It's like, I was late to the meeting. I showed up 5 minutes late. Okay, I'm out of accountability. So that's specific. That can be worked with. If I'm like, I have been treating my mom poorly lately, that's not an agreement that I made. I didn't agree with anyone to treat my mom well, unless I did. And then like, okay, what does that mean? What does it look like to treat your mom well? Let's talk about how what you did doesn't look like that, like physically. So we distinguish between data. I'm getting all over the place. There's so much like...
No. Okay, so, but... Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm trying to kind of understand, because I think it's a very complex, deep, like emotional stuff that you're doing here in these groups. It seems that way. Maybe it's not that intense, but
no, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
especially, no, it remains intense. One can become accustomed to it, but the real work is intense by its nature. The inner battle is the one that we're fighting in men's work, in MKP. Like, that's MKP's approach. It's not actually it's not like the world is blah, 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 and so we need to be this kind of man. No, it's like you are full of voices and noise and shame and emotion and judgment. Getting that clear is the work. And that way, from that place of being clear, you can be whatever you want to. And what men tend to want to be is beautiful servants to humanity.
Right.
That's what I believe about men, despite what I kind of absorbed from the air growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And even saying that men want to be beautiful gifts to humanity, even saying that is like, there's a part of me that's like, people are going to hear that and they're going to argue with you. And like, you're a bad person for saying that, which is, it's kind of nuts, right? But that's what life has led to for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it's great stuff, man. I mean, it seems, we all have our internal dialogues, right? We all are constantly battling them and determining how we navigate this life. But that's pretty cool what you're doing, man. I mean, here I am internalizing, thinking to myself like, man, look at you, look at everything you're doing.
A good bad thing.
You're doing, yeah. Am
I good? Is what Ben's doing good or bad? Is what Paul's doing good or bad? Like, is that what's happening?
Yeah. Because I'm feeling like, man, look at this guy. You're like, you're so in tune with like your feelings and your thoughts, and you're helping other men do it and all that. And I'm just like, well, what am I doing?
You're raising a child.
I am raising a child.
Among other things.
Yeah.
And you're having this podcast. I mean, I don't need to, I have the power to make you feel better about yourself right now. Ultimately, I can't do it for you, though. Like, I can give you some stuff that you can choose to internalize by noticing what's true and telling a story about Paul. Ultimately, you feeling like you're a good enough person is only you can give that to you.
Right.
And that is the work.
That's the work. Well, do you guys have like how do people find men's work? You said it's an international thing, but is it like a Baltimore website or any sort of like? I feel like that's such an ancient.
No,
do you guys have a website?
We do.
No, okay.
We do. It serves its purpose. The information that MKP provides specifically. I mean, it's a group that was sort of...
What does MKP stand for? Again, I know you said
the Mankind Project.
Mankind Project.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like, its origins, I don't know a lot about it, but I know some. There were 3 men who were employed in healing themselves, and their professions were like One of them was a very spiritual guy. I don't know what he did for work. One of them was like a clinical psychiatrist or something, and I don't know what the other guy was, like a business guy. And all of them were personally interested in helping men to heal. And they just like, they didn't totally wing it, but basically they created something, this initiation. And what they created is still like, it still looks pretty similar today, 40 years later. But over time, it went from 3 guys traveling around wherever, getting willing men to participate in this. And then I assume there was quite a lot of feedback processing going on, like what worked, what didn't, what could be better, what sucked, what hurt people unintentionally. And that's still being refined today. You know, we're still having internal conversations as an organization about like, this part of the weekend makes some men feel this way, and that doesn't work. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make them feel that way. Like, we want to make them feel safer than that. So how do we change it? And like, it's huge. Like the initiation is, the last one I staffed was last weekend before last. And there were 19 men getting initiated and 29 men on staff. And 29, I've been told, is not enough. So we were stretching. That's another jargon in men's work. You stretch. You like try on something new, and you know, you get bigger.
Not flexing, but stretching.
Stretching.
Okay.
Exactly. So I got off track of your question. How do people find out about it?
Oh, yeah. Just like, you know, if...
Yeah. So there's a website. So I was telling that history in service to the idea that it started from these 3 guys. Now I think there are only like 6 people who are actually employed by Mankind Project, like treasurer and, you know, curriculum people. So, and then everything else is volunteer. Like, people just do it because they're passionate about it. Oh, to staff a weekend, I have to pay $150.
You have to pay.
Yeah.
To volunteer.
Right.
Huh.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
And so that may give an inkling of like, this actually matters to us. And we grow from it. Like, I grow immensely when I staff, in addition to helping the initiates touch their shadow and find their purpose. So the website reflects the kind of haphazard, almost like controlled chaos of creating this thing over the course of 40 years. Like, the website's great. It can also be frustrating to use. It's mankindproject.org. You can go there and find initiation weekends to sign up for. You can find other kinds of learnings and trainings that you don't have to be initiated for. You can find the integration groups, the support and transformation groups I've been talking about. You can find contact numbers for people, because you don't have to be initiated to join one of those groups. Some of them you do. Like, they're like autonomous at this point. Like, the Mankind Project doesn't tell those groups what they do. The groups are just people deciding what they want to do. But they all pretty much use that archetypal structure: lover round, warrior round, magician round, king round, to create a container to do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, there's a lot of variety. But if you just want a support group, you can find one on that website too.
That's great, Ben. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation very much.
Yeah, and I want to say, I didn't come here to like plug the Mankind Project. It is. I just want to say that like, I started my own men's group before I knew any of this, because I wanted to make a place that was safe for people to talk about stuff that they're ashamed to talk about. And I did that, and it worked, and it was really hard. And so there's all kinds of stuff going on aside from the Mankind Project. There's so many things going on. There's something called a Tribe of Men that started in California, and I know that there's a man right now on the East Coast who's trying to start some of that going, and that's just, they also do initiations. I got a friend who lives outside of Philadelphia. He's got a group called Brothers of Wisdom, where he's initiating people in a different way. And I don't know how that works. And it's not all about initiation. There's also just like support groups that exist all over the place. In Hamden, the Baltimore Psychedelic Society has an open men's support circle, and that doesn't use these archetypes. That's just, it is what it is. And there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. Not just the Mankind Project, but I like the Mankind Project. I like the mission creation. I like the values that they consciously say they want to live up to. I like that when they don't, I can be like, hey, your fucking papers say that you are not living up to what you said. And I find them to be very receptive in most cases. Because I'm not a true believer, you know, like, and I hope that doesn't surprise you at this point. Like, everything is a story. There's nothing to be a true believer about, as far as I'm concerned. So, like, just because you're a Mankind Project guy doesn't mean I trust you. It's more likely. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt more easily than a stranger, total stranger. But if you're out of integrity, like, just because you've been initiated doesn't mean you're living a life of integrity. Doesn't mean I like you.
But what would you say to somebody that wants to be involved in this, that is a woman? I know you already talked about you want the safe space, right? Oh
yeah, I only got halfway there with that. I mean, you know, we could have a conversation about our opinions of what masculinity is and what femininity is and how they differ. And I think to answer the question in an honest way, it's necessary to do that. However, my ideas of what each of those things are not very developed. So I'm not going to say that how we're doing it and that doing men's work is the right thing to do. I do see that it, in my opinion, creating men who know what they care about and want to be beautiful servants to the world, to humanity, is a very good thing to be doing. It helps in every situation that exists. Could we create both men and women who want to be beautiful servants to humanity? Maybe we could. I don't know how to do that personally. Maybe some people do. And maybe there is no reason to gather in men-only groups. I see that it creates men who want to be and are beautiful servants to humanity. So that's good enough for me at the time being. If a woman asks me, how do I get involved? I would answer, there's an organization called The Woman Within that I know a couple people think is really fucking great. And I don't know much else about women's work. As far as I know, it's like there are people who are doing it. I don't know if they're calling it that. I think fewer people are doing it than people are doing men's work. I think like the shadow of the masculine has been quite well documented and investigated. I think the shadow of the feminine has not. Like it has throughout history, but not in our current political and societal landscape. And talking about what the shadow of the feminine might be is another area where it's like risky to even do that because people think you're bashing women.
Right. And that's kind of what I was kind of poking at, like, because there is this like sense of, hey, this isn't anti-woman. This is making men better men, right?
It's just masculinity positive, which doesn't imply femininity negative. If you're a person who believes that masculinity and femininity are adversaries, then I could see why you'd conclude that doing something for men has anything to do with harming women. I don't see masculinity and femininity or men and women as adversaries or sides in any sense. I understand why people describe it that way sometimes. I don't think it works to do that. And usually when things don't work, people get hurt. That's why they don't work. That's why we deem that they don't work, because people are getting hurt and it doesn't seem like they have to. So it can be very frustrating to me. It's becoming less so because I'm getting so used to it. When I say I'm engaged in men's work and people are like, what about women? I'm like, I just simply wasn't talking about women, and there's nothing wrong with having a conversation that's not about women. They are relevant to men and to men's work.
They are very they're very
not
powerful.
Talking about it right now at this very moment.
Sure.
I'm having a hypothetical conversation. Like, I appreciate your question because I get it all the time, and I do want to be able to answer it well and say, you're a woman, you are loved, and I want you to have what you want, and I'm not entirely sure for how you can get it. I know a lot more about how men can get what they want. And I am endeavoring to become a person who can answer that question quite thoroughly. But, I mean, my experience is of the embodied masculine, so I happen to know a lot about what it's like to be a man. I don't know a lot about what it's like to be a woman, and in certain ways I cannot, no matter how many conversations I have with women. And that's another part of why I think there is men's work, because we know what it is to be the embodied masculine. And I'm being careful here not to say a man. Yes. Because I'm fine with anybody who tells me I am the embodied masculine. That's how I see myself. That's how I strive to behave. Whatever that means to them, that's fine. And there are trans people in the Mankind Project. It's about identifying. You know, most people say identifying as a man. I'm saying identifying as the embodied masculine. And I'll leave it without trying to explain more about what I mean by that.
Yeah, no, I think you described it perfectly. I think that's great, Ben. I mean, I think what you're doing is really cool, like I said earlier. And
it's funny, you can see how by the end of that I'm very much in warrior mode. I'm like this, even though, like, yes, it's all a story, none of it's true.
Yeah.
But, like, you ask me that question, and it is true that the momentum of my defense system arises, and it's like I go into, like, I'm not being emotional. I'm going to say what is defensible. And then, like, all of my joy about it goes away. Because I don't know how to answer the question of, like, how do we help women? I'm helping women by becoming the best version of me that I can be. And I love women. That happens to be true. I think everyone loves everyone, except when they get all twisted up. And so I'm about untwisting people, and I know how to do that pretty well with men. And I know a lot of the theory that I've been talking about this whole time. With women, I don't presume to know. You know, I'll say one controversial thing. I can't tell if women care about being in integrity as much as men do. Like, men give a shit about it. When you point out to a guy that his words and actions are out of alignment with one another, he might want to kick you or scream at you, or he might be like, you're right. I want to change that. My experience with some women has been when I tell them their words and actions are not in alignment, they just are like, so what? So, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's even, and I'm generalizing, obviously. This is my experience with some people, not all women. It's been a thing that's curious to me. Like, I've tried to ask this question to certain people, to women included, like, is your opinion that women care about that way of being? Is, like, how much do you care about that? So, and I think this points at something that's different about masculinity and femininity. Like, masculine, I've been talking this whole time about choosing language to define myself, even while acknowledging that every choice is arbitrary and a story. Like, Still, I wish to choose in order to have a reference point to say, did I do it or did I not? And my impression with the feminine is like, they don't use language like that all the time. There's a different way that the feminine uses language that's also very important and useful and beautiful and creates all this loveliness in the world. But it's different than using it for the purpose of being in integrity and defining what I want to do. Somebody told me once that the world initiates women. Like, women get their period when they go through puberty. And that is an initiation in itself. Like, you can't not deal with that. With men, you can be Peter Pan. Like, the world doesn't force you to anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it forces you to go to war. But even then, you don't have to grow up.
Yeah. That's a great point. We're all just little boys.
A lot of us.
A lot of us are.
Yeah.
I feel myself like, you know, video games, for example. I still love a good video game.
Yeah.
I think it's just in my blood now, or in my, just from the childhood experiences and just kind of disconnecting, decompressing. It's almost like a form of, I mean, it sounds dramatic, but like therapy, like just decompressing.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I feel like there is that part of me that's like, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just in this fake world for a little bit.
Yeah, that resonates.
And then there's a lot of men that spend way too much time on these games, right? And I've been in those places where I'm like, okay, what am I doing with my life? Yeah.
Yeah, in the past. I don't play them anymore because it's too easy to get sucked in.
Yeah. So that's something that I'm like been disconnecting for the past few years. Like, who cares? Who cares about this stuff? You know, I'd rather find more purpose. Yeah.
Oh, who cares about the video games? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right, but this is a fake world. I forget how you said it a moment ago. Like, some version of like, it doesn't matter what I do. Like, that's a shadow. That's a belief that whether you want it to be or not is governing part of how you behave. And you said it out loud. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a story that you maintain about yourself, though.
Sure.
And we talk about our little boys all the time in men's work. Like, we acknowledge that part of ourselves consciously. Not everybody does. Some men are better at it than others. It took me a long time. Like, there was a period after my father died where I just turned to wood. So, like, to think about my 7 and 8-year-old self has typically just been a well of shame. I think to some extent, like, life was unbearably confusing and difficult. And so, like, going back in my mind's eye to that age is just like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. I fucking hate that kid. Like, it's harsh. And I think a lot of people have that kind of a thing, whether their father died or not. Like, when something bad happens, something unbearable, and we do bear it, that's the truth. I'm still here today. I bore it. I got through it. But part of it was just shutting off experience. And so going back to that little boy, to the times of being alive where I didn't get what I needed or address myself with respect, that's a lot of what men's work is about. And it doesn't have to be men. Women, like, that obviously applies directly to every human. But that is one of the approaches. Like, really, my little boy, he's speaking up right now, and he's not, you know, I made the mistake for a while with my little boy of thinking like, well, he's always right, like whatever he wants needs to come out, but he's immature. Like, he's precious, he's also immature, so his decisions aren't always right, but I do need to take him seriously, honor him. Which doesn't mean put him on a pedestal. It just means honor him just as much as every other part of me.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard, especially in this world where like categorizing and comparing are exceptionally common ways of relating. If I categorize myself and compare the different parts of myself with one another and decide one's better than the other, I'm not going to end up in love with myself. There's going to be parts of me that I don't love. And that's no longer acceptable to me. So I don't do it internally as best I can, and I don't agree with doing it externally anymore. Like, it can be useful, but when it comes to moralizing, it turns into moralizing those comparisons. And I think that hurts us.
Yeah.
It hurts community.
Yeah, I think comparing yourself is human nature. It's hard to battle against, but I think there's some you see what that person's doing over there, especially now with all the
yeah,
social media, all the, I have some friends that are struggling, just trying to find their purpose. They're single.
mm-hmm.
They trying to find a girlfriend or something, and they're just having a hard time with it. It just seems really hard. And then they see other people, and it's like, oh, look at all these people. Oh, they're getting married. They're having kids. They're like moving on with their life. And here I am stuck.
Right.
So I think
they use it as evidence that they're bad people.
Right.
Because stuck is a word, but attached to stuck is probably, I suck. I'm bad. Like, being stuck is bad. We don't say that part out loud, but it's there. And that's the kind of shadow stuff too.
Do you feel stuck?
Stuck? I'm emerging from it. Yeah, that would be a whole nother thing to get into. My last relationship ended in a way that was really, I'll say, damaging. I mean, knowing that that's a story. And telling it, see, if that's still the story I'm telling, like, that implies I'm damaged. And what does that mean to me? I'd have to, like, investigate it. I could tell a different story that's more true, because it's more just what happened. Like, I became afraid of being myself in a lot of scenarios. And I associated that with women. I generalized poorly. And so I did become stuck. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to talk to women, especially ones that I actually want to talk to. They're the ones I won't talk to the most.
It's funny.
So I'm stuck. There was a stuckness, and I'm getting unstuck from that. Like, literally within the last couple of weeks, that's happening. It's taken me about 3.5 years to recover from both a lifetime of all the incorrect beliefs about women that became part of my shadow, plus that particular relationship that I had that was very challenging for me. To emerge at a point where I feel safe as I actually am. That's the thing about safety. Like, feeling unsafe and being unsafe are different things. Or they're not, because the internal experience is what creates our choices.
Right.
But, it's possible for me to look and see, like, okay, if I talk to her and she says, get the fuck away from me, am I unsafe? Like, no. I can weather that. I just don't want to.
Right.
She's probably not going to do that anyway, but I don't usually go through it all. It's just like, I'm afraid, and that's the end of it. And then later I might make up a story when I'm feeling ashamed, like, how come I fucking am still afraid? I'm such a loser, whatever. She's probably whatever. That's when we start making up stories, and then that sticks in us and makes us stuck.
Right.
So if I am a man who knows I feel afraid right now, how am I going to choose to act given that? That's the process of being unstuck. And that's what I'm getting better at.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
I can't wait till you're a father.
Yeah, you said that before, man. That was really meaningful to me when you said
I mean,
that.
dude, just the thoughts you have about just how connected you are with your own self is pretty cool, man. It's really unique, and you know, like I've mentioned before in our conversations on set, being a father is a really, it's not a unique thing, but it's the most unique thing you'll ever do in your life, I think. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's a really cool experience because you are so responsible for another person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and so how much do you worry about it?
not everyone chooses to be that responsible.
And that's also right.
But I'm glad you are, and I hear that.
Regardless of the relationship I have with my wife, I would always want to be a part of my daughter's life. And so, yeah, you just hear about all those single mom stories, and I'm like, man, I wonder what's going on with those dads. Do they not want? Something tells me that they want to be a part of the kid's life, but maybe, because what I'm experiencing feels very, maybe overwhelming, or it feels very universal. Like, oh yeah, this is definitely how everyone feels, but it clearly isn't, because there's, even with people, you said earlier, even with people that, you know, oh yeah, I don't talk to my dad anymore. Oh, we don't have a relationship at all. Like, I wonder if those dads have just come to peace with the fact that their child, because our kids always, they grow up and then they don't need us. It's only in these first few years, and then once they're off into high school, they don't really need us. Sure, we can guide them and help them, but
yeah, maybe some actually rest in a real peace. I was going to say, I think it's a falsely constructed peace. Like, for me, I decided when I was about 14 years old that humans are not trustworthy. And at that time, I didn't like that. It was a bit upsetting. But it didn't make me despair. And it was something I decided. And then after, I didn't remember that. I decided that and behaved in line with that decision. It took me like 25 years for me to start thinking, wait a minute. I remember making that decision when I was 14. And so there was a way in which I felt at peace about my position in the world, living as if I trust no one. But I wasn't really. It was tearing me apart. I just didn't recognize that. So I'd imagine with these fathers, even if they have constructed a story that says they're at peace with the situation, their heart, I think most people's hearts will be yearning to connect with their child. And I've heard lots of stories like that where people have reconnected with their fathers, and their father was like, essentially like, yes, yes, I've wanted this for so long. And usually, they usually know that they fucked up. And they do, in a sense, make peace with, I'm speculating entirely, but just from stories I've come to know that, men, they have to make some kind of peace with it, because it is what it is. Their kid doesn't want to see them. So they have to decide how to carry on.
Yeah.
And just wait.
Yeah.
Or, some men take action. Some men gain the tools to know how to understand their impact and speak to those that they impacted in a way that opens conversation, and let go of the justifications. Like, I had to go to work. I had to blah, blah, blah. No, you didn't. And that's part of the men's work. You don't have to do anything. Everything you do is your choice. And we could get into what about people who were thrown in jail like that. That's a whole nother element to it. But, if you're unconstrained physically, then everything you do is your choice.
Right. Yeah.
And even within your constraints, everything you do is your choice.
Yeah. I think,
and it's hard for people to hear that. It's been hard for me to hear that, depending on what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think going back to the, oh, I fucked up, or, oh, I did this. I think I heard this from, I think it was a child psychologist of some sort, very successful person who's giving parental advice, and something that really stuck with me. And I think this goes with personal relationships as well, not just for parent-child, but the ability to repair. And what I mean by that is you yell at your kid, or your kid walks up to you and says, I don't like this food. And you just spent 30 minutes cooking it. And you've had a long day, you're tired, and your kid comes off as a brat. And you're just like, bah, and you explode. You're like, you should be grateful, which they should, but they're also little.
That's a story too.
That's a story. These are all stories. Remember, I told you I'm working on my storytelling. No.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. But learning how to repair. So when you are going to explode on your children. You are going to fuck up. You are going to do the wrong thing. But then going back, well,
I gotta stop interrupting you.
No. You can interrupt all you want. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to relationships, learning to repair them, I think, is a very important skill. If you want to. If you act a certain way to your wife or your husband, and you shouldn't have, you're like, oh man, I kind of exploded on them and said these mean things. Coming back and apologizing and not saying, but saying, hey, next time I'll try not to do that. Next time I want to behave this way. Mm-hmm. So I think that's always in the back of my mind when it comes to like parenting my daughter, because I am going to mess up.
Right, by your own standards, you're going to mess up.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't put myself in a position yet to be that responsible to someone since I started to be able to speak to you how I've been speaking to you about my impact and my shadow and all that. I have conversations with neighbors and friends and family where I am much more aware of my impact and how I want to be, and having my actions and words in alignment. Thoughts is a whole nother story. That's interesting, actually, how they say integrity, my thoughts, words, and actions are in alignment. I actually don't think it's possible to get your thoughts in alignment. Thoughts just arise. But that's abstract anyway. Yeah, how do
in the mind of Ben.
How do I come to somebody and own my impact in a way that's meaningful to them?
Yeah.
It's not easy. But the more I know who I am and where my behavior is coming from, or just that I'm angry, that this is my story and I know that it's not true, like that gets so many people into trouble in arguments all the time, because we each have different stories about how life should be. And a lot of the time we don't recognize that my should is different from your should. Like, we never talked about it. And so we're having this argument and we just don't understand each other, and we can't even figure out why not. So if I know what my shoulds are and why I've chosen those shoulds, and that I have chosen them, then I'm in a much better position to come to somebody owning my impact in a meaningful way. And I can come with much less shame, and shame like invades every conversation. It makes it not go as well. because shame makes us want to hide what's really going on from ourselves, importantly. So, yeah, you've been using the word should. I don't use that word.
Yeah?
Not if I can help it. Should comes from somebody else told you something once, and you went with it, and you didn't necessarily think about why.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
I think when I say I should do this, I should do this, I should do that, it's just because of the responsibility that I have as a parent. You know, I've said it before. I mean, that's really all like I want, you know, this want to influence a human, your offspring, to be a quote unquote good human, to be resilient, to have all the traits of honestly, to be happy, to be mentally, I mean, we all have our thoughts, we all have our struggles, and we all have our hardships, but you want to be able to build a child that can deal with that. So how do you do that? How do you build resiliency in a child? How hard on them are you? I'm glad we're raising our kid in these ages where we can read 100 different opinions on what you should do, and then you just pick, that one sounds good.
Yeah.
You know, so when I say I should do something, it comes from a place of I need to. It's like it's ingrained in like the purpose that I'm living right now is to, I don't want to say build it. I'm not building a life for her. She has her own life, but I want to make sure she turns out okay.
Yeah. Well, resilient and happy is what I heard.
Yeah.
And mentally something. You struggled for a word there, but
yeah.
Or emotionally. Maybe you're building a container. You're building a path that she can walk that has some guardrails on it for now. Something like that. Not building her life, but building the opportunity for her to choose her life. And to be able to be okay when you're not there.
Yeah. Kind of like right now, she's upset.
Right.
Who knows why? But she needs those feelings. She needs the feelings of frustration. Right? It's very easy for us to make our kids comfortable. It's very easy to make ourselves comfortable.
Yeah.
Medicate through, I mean, you could do the drugs and alcohol route, or you could do the video games. You can just numb the difficult feelings.
Yeah, numbness is comfortable, isn't it?
Right.
Or it's hard to tell the difference between numbness and comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, comfort is practiced almost as a virtue in America, and I don't think that's working.
Yeah. But being comfortable is...
It's nice.
It's something maybe to strive for sometimes. You know, it's like, hey, I want some comfort. You know, I'm sacrificing all this, my time and energy, to then have comfort, right? I work all these hours, I make all this money, so then I can have some comfort when I'm not working, you know.
I heard an idea recently, I may have shared this with you last time we talked, that a life to strive for is one where it's up to other people to decide whether I'm working or having fun, working or playing. For me, everything is both. I'm not saying that's true about me. That's what I strive to be. And it happens more. Like, I get to a point where I'm not sacrificing ever. Unless what I mean is there are two things that are concurrent that I'd like to do, and I'm choosing one. Then in that some way I'm sacrificing the other. But that's just my choice. I don't deserve comfort as a result of that. I can choose to devote my time to being comfortable too.
Kind of like what you said a while back. Everything it's your choice. You don't have to do
exactly
anything. You just feel like you need to. But
right, yeah, that feeling emerges in me too. But then, how do I encounter that feeling? How do I, do I, or does that take me over? This idea of everything is my choice, I think, is very much part and parcel with the men's work. And I think with human personal development in general.
mm-hmm.
Like, I'm actually not entitled to anything. And I'm actually not safe 100% ever. And that's life. So how am I going to deal with that? And we have a culture where we say we have rights and we're entitled to this and that, and we've been collectively trying to make that true, that anybody who needs water can have it, but that's not the way of life. There are beings that die of thirst all the time. They don't have a right to that. They're not entitled to safety or comfort. It's just we strive to make a world where that can be true, and where we do choose our sacrifices as a community, as a nation. And there's a lot of people who disagree with the choices that we've made, and that makes sense to me. I think a lot of conversation takes as a given that people are entitled to certain things. And I don't see that as being how the world works. We can choose to set it up so that somebody gets to be entitled, but it's not ultimately sustainable. There's always going to be a bunch of moving parts surrounding that ability to be comfortable.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Ben. I'd love to do it again, too.
Note. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're talking about deep stuff, man. Deep stuff.
I don't mind that, what I was just saying anyway.
Yeah.
It's great. Like, life is a grand adventure.
Yeah.
And it's full of risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty cool, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah. Risk is cool. That's another, I mean, keep going back to fatherhood, but letting your child take risks. It's a huge thing. It's so easy to be like, no, don't do that. Oh, don't, be careful. I do it all the time.
Yeah, well,
be careful. But like,
they don't understand. I taught a little girl how to make a fire the other day, and taught her how to like feel where the fire's hot. She was scared, and her parents had, of course, been telling her whole life, like, just stay away, stay this far away. And I'm like, this is how you can place a stick where you mean to. And the whole process of getting there is like, it's hot here, but it's not painful. It's hot. And then you put your hand lower. She didn't really do it, but I was showing her.
Mm-hmm.
And she experienced smoke in the eyes. It didn't kill her, but then she knows, you say, oh, be careful of the smoke. It's like, it means nothing until you get smoke in your eye. It's just part of life.
Like I said, man, you're going to be a great dad one day. Well, thanks, Ben. I got to get back to the fam. Yeah. Thanks for coming out and being the guinea pig of this whole thing.
Sure, I love it. I'm aware you tried to end this conversation like 4 times already. And we just kept going.
I mean, we could keep going, but
no, I got things to do too.
Yeah. You got it's 5:35. So
perfect for me.
But Ben, it was great. So until next time, all right?
Yeah. I want to hug you.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
This has really been awesome.
Yeah.